Well, we are one shy of a quorum, but I guess we'll get started anyway. We'll just delay approving the minutes until we have a quorum. Hopefully we will. So I guess we'll start with matters from the board or the public. And Bobby, anything to say? Doesn't look like it. All right, well, we'll jump over approving the minutes for the time being, and so we want to do unified planning work programs first, or do we want to do?
We can do that.
2050 first.
Yep, it does ask for a recommendation at the end, but we can skip to that recommendation if and when we get a quorum.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
So last month, we went through the UPWP. I provided a draft copy of it with all of the budgets. I wrote a memo to you all in this most recent packet, just updating a couple of things that have changed between that draft and this one. The first one is that FTA confirmed the amount of funding we'd be getting. The first number that we were using was a planning number for our best guess. That's been updated to 136,851. And then the same with VDOT's state planning research funds. It was a placeholder at the same amount as last year, 170. That's now going to be 202,500. So within the draft UPWP, I updated all of the numbers. I updated all the narrative to reflect that. We also got a couple of comments on the draft, add a semicolon here instead of a comma, nothing substantive. Add a little detail under this bullet. So I made those updates. One of them specifically is under transit and rail planning. There was a recommendation to specifically add support the transit agencies, transit strategic planning efforts, whether it's in the planning or the implementation. So I did add that bullet to the draft. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same draft that you guys looked at last month and once. And if we have a quorum, we'd be asking you guys to make a motion to recommend it to the policy board for approval.
All right, well,
You need something for four, right?
I don't know, I didn't count.
Yeah,
Did you count?
we do have stuff. Yeah,
well, we
you're
have-
seven, you're four.
is 50% a quorum? You
Half-
can
half
declare
plus-
it.
Half plus one, yeah.
Well, no chairman can declare. Well, now we have plus one.
Now you definitely do.
By that quorum. All right, well then, given that we now have a quorum, we'll consider the minutes from the last meeting. I looked them over, they look good to me, but does anyone else have any additions, corrections? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as is? So. We have a second. Moved and seconded, all in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting, say aye. All right, so we have that, then the next item of business is we need a motion to recommend to the MPO Policy Board that they approve the Unified Planning Work Program with the recent additions and corrections. Is there a motion for that? So moved. Is there a second? I'll second. All right, moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. All right, motion carried. So we're on to Alan.
All right.
Alan, that you were having difficulty reading the name tags, which I can appreciate. The light glares off of them, so you can't really read them. So if, I guess, if when we get to asking you questions, if we say who we are first, maybe that'll help with that issue.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks for
Okay.
having me.
Well, go ahead with your presentation.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me again. I am down in Richmond, couldn't make it in person, so appreciate you letting me do this virtually. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. What's that?
Oh.
Can everyone hear me?
This is okay. They don't have a computer.
Yeah. You say it's not it? No, it isn't.
There we go.
I was just checking.
Can you all hear me?
I can hear you, but it sounds like maybe the room cannot.
Okay, we're back.
All right, can you hear me now?
Technical difficulty. All right, go ahead.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And can you see my screen?
can you? Yes.
I can kind of, yeah, okay, I can hear you now. Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks again for having me. We're going to talk about our progress on the Moving Toward 2050 plan, which we have been working very hard to get done, especially this last week or so. We sent an early working draft of that to you guys in your packets last week. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit, talk about what's been done since those packets were sent out and what will happen next. So our agenda today is to do a little overview of where we are, talk about the drafting process. I'm going to go chapter by chapter, just talk a little bit about what each part of the plan talks about. I'm going to talk about edits made since April 10th, and that's when you guys got the draft packet. We'll talk about the constrained budget a little bit, next steps, and then we'll go into discussion and feedback. So overview of where we are. So in 2022, TJPDC contracted us, EPR, to assist with public engagement, needs prioritization, and federal requirement compliance. Due to staff turnover, we've stepped in to write and format the plan as TJPDC staff has prepared for the required May adoption. As I mentioned, your meeting packets included an unformatted working draft of the plan, which reflects materials that you all have reviewed over the last 18 months. So aside from the constrained budget section, which we'll talk about a little bit later, none of the content should be new to those involved in the process, but this is the first time that it's been all pulled together into a comprehensive narrative. So some sections of that draft were incomplete when you received that working draft. The completed draft will be finished by Friday, and we'll provide you with a link to review it. It's about 99% done right now, and it'll be up by Friday. We'll send you guys a link to take a look at that. We haven't formatted it yet, as in it's just a Word document right now. It's just about the content because there may be required changes before we get to that point. You'll get a final formatted draft that's more polished and looking a little bit more presentable before our next meeting in May, but all the content will be ready by Friday. The drafting process for the plan, we started with a careful review of the existing plan from 2045. We kept some aspects of the existing document, but all the data, the figures, and the project lists have been updated for 2050. Aside from updating the plan's content, we tweaked the existing plan's outline and narrative flow a little bit. Some edits include, we created an introduction chapter, which the last plan started with demographics. It was a lot of data at once that wasn't particularly tied to anything in the plan. So we decided to put that in an appendix. All that information is still there, but we decided that it would be better to start with an intro narrative. So that explains the purpose, the goals, and objectives before discussing any of the existing conditions, the deficiencies, or improvements. As I mentioned, we moved the demographics to the end of the document. So the first chapter starts with an overview. The existing plan started with demographics. This one starts with an overview of the plan. So talk about the plan's purpose, the planning process. We have a summary of public and stakeholder engagement, putting some themes that were pulled out of that. An overview of the plan's goals, objectives, and lenses, and the processes taken to develop them. Chapter 2 is about the existing conditions of the road network, not just the road network, the transportation network. So roadways, bridges, freight, public transit, passenger rail, bike and ped facilities, travel to demand management. So every aspect of the existing system. It also includes some national goals and performance measures for states and MPOs, public transportation safety performance data, and some statewide highway safety data. The third chapter is about transportation deficiencies. So it's looking at parts of the network's infrastructure that are expected to be incomplete or insufficient for 2050 conditions. So we look at each travel mode and consider population and employment for 2050, or projected population and employment for 2050, and road network conditions as well. So we use that information to develop an initial list of roadway, transit, bike, and ped projects to improve those areas. Chapter 4 goes over the needs evaluation process, which we've talked about in these meetings. The process of needs identification, project identification, project prioritization. So none of that should be new to anyone who's been to these meetings, but it's a recap for anyone who's not been through this process and seen it step by step. Chapter 5 is a brief one that just talks about some additional transportation system elements. So it talks about intersections, bike and ped improvements, and bridge needs specifically, because some funding is dedicated to those specific project types, not roadway improvements. And Chapter 6 talks about emerging technologies and things that may or may not come up in the future that the MPO should be prepared for or be learn more about, incorporate into future plans. So things that are already here but are evolving, like e-bikes and scooters, are becoming more and more of a trend. Connected and autonomous vehicles, again, that's something that we're already dealing with, but what will that look like in the future potentially? Telecommuting and remote work, especially looking at the impact of COVID, since the last plan was written in 2019. So what has that done? What does that look like? How does that change the transportation network? And we talk about sustainable and resilient transportation systems as well. Chapter 7 is where we talk about the actual projects. So it includes the constrained and vision lists of the projects that were reviewed by you all, MPO Tech Committee, and the MPO Policy Board, as well as MPO staff. They're organized by Transportation Improvement Program category. It also includes a list of funded projects and a breakdown of the CLRP budget. The appendices are going to have, or they will have, an overview of the region's demographics, like I mentioned. There'll be a page for each project that has more details on it. So it'll have maps of the locations of the projects, details about what each project is, and some more information on each project. There's a record of public participation in the appendix, documentation on the performance-based planning process, and there's a section that describes other plans that are related to moving toward 2050. So the draft version that you all had in your packets, there have been several edits since then, so just wanted to go over those real quick in case there are any questions about that. We updated the acknowledgement section to include the MPO staff. We revised the process section in the introductions. The previous version had outdated language from the previous plan that didn't necessarily reflect what we did this time. The guiding principles section, that ended up being incorporated into the lenses, goals, and objectives. It was basically leftover language that didn't need to be there, so we pulled that out. That's all covered in the lenses, goals, and objectives. There was a mislabeled y-axis on figure 5 that we fixed. We added information about the Afton Express route in the transit section. In Chapter 3, for the deficiencies overview, we added some language that kind of clarified the methodology we use for prioritization. Map 21, the PSI intersections and segments, was missing all of the PSI intersections and segments for Charlottesville. So we went back and added those. We rearranged a couple of the projects in the constrained division lists into different categories. Didn't change anything about the projects themselves, just where they belonged in the categories. As of today, we've completed all the maps, charts, and data updates and fixed a handful of spelling and grammar errors. So there's been quite a bit of work in the past week since you last got those packets. Just wanted to kind of cover that. And this last bit of the plan that we haven't really talked about too much is the constrained budget. So VDOT reviewed our CLRP budget assumptions and provided the following breakdown, which is included in Chapter 7. VDOT also provided a list of potential state of good repair bridge projects that could be included in the plan that we're currently reviewing. We'll be adding a few of those to the plan. But this breakdown basically describes the categories that we used to sort the projects into. So those were safety and operational improvements, transportation enhancements, and traffic and safety operations. We rolled the safety and operational improvements and traffic and safety operations into one category. So you'll see that number there, that 416-612-222 is those two categories combined. Transportation enhancements is its own category. And then there's a separate budget for bridge projects. So this is all, it's not an actual pot of money that exists that we can just pull from. It's just a forecast of how much money the MPO is expected to have access to over the next 20 or so years to 2050. If there are any more specific questions about this one, I think Sandy is there and she'll probably be able to answer them a little better than I can. So once we get to the end here, we can talk about that. And just one more slide here. So next steps. So you'll receive a link to the completed draft plan by Friday. You should review that and forward any questions or comments to the TJPDC by Friday, April 26th. They will forward those on to us and we'll make any changes required. We're going to advertise public comment from April 22nd to May 22nd. And you'll have the final formatted draft in your meeting packet a week before our next meeting in May. At that time, the group must forward a recommendation to the MPO Policy Board, which must consider the final document for adoption on May 22nd. And the MPO may decide to revise the plan at any time. And while the Policy Board must adopt the plan in May, there will be future opportunities to tweak the document if the need should arise. That's where we are right now. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, I don't know, looking at the graph that we had to look at, figure 5 and figure 6, figure 5 was cat ridership, figure 6 is jaunt ridership. The numbers in both figures were identical, which obviously they shouldn't be. So maybe you fixed that since then, but
I will double check that. Thank you for noting that. 5 and 6. Yeah, I will make sure to double check that and fix that. Apologies for that.
No problem. All right, any other questions for Adam?
I had a question about how you're gonna have the public comment period. Is it just gonna be the entire plan is put forth and people can read it, or could there be an effort to have like an overview so that people can see like the broad strokes and provide comments on that, because it is a large document that would be inaccessible to many people.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I believe we're required to post the whole plan,
Yeah.
but having an overview, maybe an executive summary to go along with it could definitely be helpful. Yeah, if we can put that together.
It may also be helpful. I think there's some posters that were created for the open house, so it might also be helpful to make sure that those are linked where the public comment section is, because that might be an easier option for people to review as well.
That's a great idea. Yeah, no, I think that's yeah, we'll make sure that those links are available, and if there's anything that I think is missing from those posters that's relevant, we can type something up for that as well.
I have a question. This is Greg. I have a question about the public comment period.
Yeah.
On the same day that the document is supposed to be voted on, which doesn't seem right. Well, I guess, you mentioned that they could revise it at any time, but is that likely? Should it end sooner? So that people, if they're procrastinators like me, they do it on the 22nd and their comments may never be taken into account.
It can also be that the draft that the policy board looks at is approved with the amendments that are recommended that come in very late. And there's also breaking news that the policy board is changing their meeting to the 21st instead of the 22nd. Good thing is we were able to revise the notice going out into the paper today. So that will show to the 21st, but yes, it goes all the way up to the date of the policy board meeting.
Speaking of policy board meeting, I mean, this board isn't planning to meet in May, so we're not gonna get a chance to express our recommendation one way or the other, not that it would really matter anyway, but.
You can absolutely express your recommendations. You would just do it via direct comment to us. So we're gonna send by this Friday, all of the final content. That'll have all of the updated figures, that'll have all of the narrative updated by Friday. We'll send that to you via email, and then you'll have a month to be able to provide comments on that draft to us directly, knowing you weren't gonna have a meeting.
I guess, rather than Greg's waiting till the last minute, maybe it would be advisable if the members of this board would, look at it sooner rather than later. Because it does take a while to read it and analyze it more carefully. So especially once the maps are added. I think, yeah, we're more likely to do a good job of reviewing it if we start it sooner. Just a recommendation.
Yeah, it is quite a long document. So, please feel free to ask any questions, any comments, anything that you catch that was a mistake. Happy to hear any of that. It's been an effort to get this across the finish line. So
Yeah.
definitely appreciate your review.
Good. Any other questions, comments? No, well, then I guess, Ellen, we're done with that one, so.
Great. Thank you all.
Here.
Okay.
So I guess we're now ready for any other comments or matters from the public or the committee. I don't think we have any members of the public, so.
No, I'll just add, Ray, your point is really well taken. I mean, I think under the circumstances with the staff transitions happening when they did, and in a more ideal world, this draft would have been able to be ready a little bit sooner. But having to transition staff and then get the consultants on board to be able to do the completion of the plan, the timing just worked out where we're running up to the wire to get this in and fully drafted on time. So I really do appreciate you guys taking a look at it once you get that final version, because I know their team is working daily on changes to this document.
I'll also mention though, if you know people who are interested that want extra time to review this, those posters are up on the website and there is a comment on the website. So they can still review like the summary document and provide feedback on the materials that are there.
Can you tell me the more precisely the website?
Well, we're gonna get an email presumably on Friday.
Yeah, it's, if you go to the campo.tjpec.org, and then you can navigate there's under process documents, you get a long range transportation plan.
Yep.
And then, you scroll down and it's, moving toward 2050.
Got it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Well, and there being no further comments, I think we're done, so.
Well, I do have one.
Go
I
ahead.
just one really quick update I can share is that, VDOT is currently working wrapping up the Barrack Street pipeline project, but, for the Ivy Road, pipeline project, and then also for the I-64 Fifth Street interchange, which is being developed for a smart scale application, they have a survey that will be launching on Monday. So, keep an eye out for that. Hopefully you'll see it pop up on your social media, but keep an eye out for that and of course share it. Please, provide your feedback.
All right, well, with that, we're adjourned.
That is
Cool.
the fastest.
That's never happened.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see you next.